Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Martin, who will present the commencement address to the class of 2013.
Thank you very much. I am very honored to be a member of your class. By tradition, I am now a member of the 2013 class of St. Peter's University, and that makes me very proud. So congratulations, fellow graduates. I should say I am as proud as a Jesuit is allowed to be. You know the old joke, Jesuits are #1 in all things, including humility. Let me begin with a parable that has to do with your namesake, St. Peter. There's an interfaith gathering at St. Peter's University, and all the participants, Catholics, Protestants, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, even agnostics and atheists, are on a lunch break. They go to the chicken shack and they get food poisoning and die. So they arrive at the gates of heaven, kind of bummed out because, you know, they're dead. But they're happy because they're in heaven. And St. Peter comes out to greet them, and he says to the Protestants, "Hey, welcome to heaven. Thanks for all the great work you did in helping people learn the Bible and all those great hymns. You are very welcome. Go to room 5, but make sure not to look in room 1. So off they go. Then St. Peter says to the Jewish crowd, "Thank you for keeping the covenant so faithfully and following all the commandments that God has given you. So, Mazel Tov, welcome to heaven. You can go to room 4, but don't look in room 1. Then he turns to the Muslims and says, "Thank you for all of your daily prayers and your devout observances of all that the Holy Quran taught. Welcome to heaven. You can go to room 3, but don't look in room 1. Finally, one of the agnostics, who's surprised to be there at all, says to St. Peter, "What's in room 1? And St. Peter says, "Oh, that's the Catholics. They think they're the only ones up here." And that's a true story. Now, my fellow graduates, you are probably wondering why you're spending the final hours of your time at St. Peter's University listening to cheesy religious jokes, even if it is about St. Peter. You're probably thinking that if you're going to go to commencement, at least there should be a point to this talk. Well, that is the point, which is this: lighten up. Don't take yourself so seriously. Or, since this is a Jesuit university, not a college anymore, I should frame things more academically. How about this? Joy, humor, and laughter are underappreciated values in the spiritual life, and they represent an essential element to a healthy relationship with God. Now, it's not clear why humor and laughter have been deemed as inappropriate in religious settings, but I'm sure you all have met people who seem to think that being religious means being deadly serious all the time. But when you're deadly serious, you're seriously dead. In Christian circles, these are known as the frozen chosen. Now, there's a host of reasons, sociological, theological, even philosophical, why humor is downplayed in religious circles. And when it comes to Christianity, the reasons start at the beginning, with Jesus. Many of us still have a hard time imagining Jesus as someone who laughed, who had, God forbid, a sense of fun, but he surely did. Anyone who told clever stories and amusing parables must have had a sense of humor. So why don't we see more of this in the Gospels? Why don't we see Jesus as a funny guy? Well, one reason is that we live in a different culture, and we simply don't get some of the intentionally funny parts of the New Testament. Humor, as you know, from living in a multicultural environment like St. Peter's, is very culture-bound, right? If you're Anglo, you may not get some of the humor from your Hispanic or African American or Asian American friends. Humor doesn't translate a lot from culture to culture, right? So it's culture-bound. It's also time-bound. Check out a movie from TCM from the 1940s, a supposed comedy, and you'll see that some of the jokes fall flat. So if humor is culture-bound and time-bound, imagine how hard it is for someone in 21st century America to appreciate jokes from 1st century Palestine. We're simply missing some of the humor that's in the Bible. Moreover, we've heard these stories so many times they cease to be funny. Take the gospel story of Nathanael. Remember Nathanael? Nathanael is sitting by himself, and he's told that the Messiah is from Nazareth, Jesus of Nazareth. And Nathanael says, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" That's a bit of a dig at Jesus' hometown, which was a tiny little backwater. It's a joke. It's like saying, "Can anything good come from Jersey City?" Right? Oh. Now you laugh at that. Why do you laugh at that? Because you haven't heard that before. But "Can anything good come from Nazareth" is a dig like that. It was supposed to be funny. So we've heard that story so many times we miss the humor. We're missing out on the humor of the New Testament and Jesus' humor, and that affects how we look at our own spiritual lives. Reaching even farther back, the Old Testament is filled with good humor, even laughter. When Abraham and Sarah, who are age 199, remember them? Sarah got married early, so she's only 99. They're visited by 3 strangers who tell them that Sarah is going to have a baby. And Abraham, according to the book of Genesis, quote, falls on his face laughing. When Sarah overhears the news of her pregnancy, she laughs too. "Why did you laugh?" says God. You can look this up in Genesis. "I didn't laugh," says Sarah. "Yes, you did," says God. And when they have a son, they name him Isaac. In the Hebrew, Yitzhak, which means he laughs. And Sarah says in that wonderful line, "And all will laugh with me because God has brought laughter into my life." So there you have it. At the beginning of our 3 great faiths, right, is a laugh. It all began with a laugh. Stories about the humor of the saints reaches as far back as the early Roman martyrs. In the 3rd century, St. Lawrence, who was burned to death on a gridiron over hot coals, called out to his executioners, "Turn me over and take a bite, I'm done on this side," in Latin. Or St. Augustine, who famously prayed, "Lord, give me chastity, but not yet." No comment. Saintly humor continues right up until modern times. The most well-known contemporary example is Pope John the 23rd, who served as Pope between 1958 and 1963. The Italian-born Pope, who described himself as just a peasant, had an earthy sense of humor. One day someone said to him, "Your Holiness, how many people work in the Vatican?" And he said, "About half of them." In the 1940s, when John was still the Archbishop and the ambassador to France, he was at an elegant dinner party in Paris, seated across from a woman wearing a very low-cut dress. Maybe not that low-cut, it wasn't like Lady Gaga was there. And his secretary turned to him and said, "What a scandal!" And John said, "What's the scandal?" And the secretary said, "That woman wearing that dress. Everyone is looking at her cleavage." And John said, "No one is looking at her. Everyone is looking at me to see if I am looking at her." Now, my fellow graduates, I am not advocating a mindless, idiotic happiness. I'm not saying that your life after St. Peter's will be devoid of sadness, or that you should be a grinning idiot all the time. You would be a robot if you weren't sad during times of tragedy or pain or struggle. But as the book of Ecclesiastes says, there is a time to mourn. But Ecclesiastes also said there is a time to laugh. And in the religious and spiritual sphere, we forget this at our peril. In short, the great spiritual masters from every tradition knew the value of humor and laughter. So let me just give you 3 quick reasons why. First of all, humor is a tool for humility. We can tell jokes about ourselves to deflate our egos, which is a good thing for everyone. Look, you're about to graduate from a Jesuit university. It's easy to get stuck up. It's easy in religious circles too. For example, that Catholic joke I told at the beginning is fun to tell, but it reminds me that Catholics need to be careful about assuming they have all the answers. Self-deprecatory jokes remind us not to take ourselves so seriously. As a college graduate, you will go on to a position of prominence and may be tempted to think that you're better than everybody else. Well, don't. We're all limited, finite, and perfect beings. From the guy who cleans up the dorms on Sunday morning to the president of the university. We're all beloved children of God, none of us better than the others. Laughing at ourselves helps us to remember that. A second reason for humor is this. Humor speaks truth to power. A witty remark is a time-honored way to challenge the pompous, the puffed up, and the powerful. Jesus used humor in that way, exposing and diffusing some of the arrogance of some of the religious authorities of his time. Humor is a weapon in the battle against arrogance that affects all of us and infects religious institutions because they are made up of human beings. Humor speaks truth to power. The mother of a friend of mine was once in the hospital at the same time the local bishop was, nowhere near here, by the way. And the bishop was recovering from some minor surgery. The bishop took it upon himself to go from room to room and meet all of the patients. He came into my friend's mother's room and said to her, "Well, dear, I know just how you feel." And she said, "Really? When was your hysterectomy?" Later on, they became friends, and years later, he presided at her funeral mass and told that story on himself. He was able to take himself not so seriously. Finally, joy is an important part of our relationship with God. One of the best ways of thinking about a relationship is as a friendship. And any healthy friendship is leavened with joy, some humor, and lots of laughter. So the same goes with our relationship with God. Try incorporating joy in your spiritual life. The book of Isaiah says, "The Lord takes delight in his people." So, my fellow graduates, can you imagine God taking delight in you? If that doesn't work, how about this? How many times have you heard God loves you? Raise your hands if you heard God loves you. Actually, some people aren't raising their hands. I got news for you. God loves you. But you tend to think, yeah, whatever. That's what God does. It's like wallpaper. But how about this? God likes you. God likes you. God delights in you. God enjoys your company. God likes you. Can you imagine God liking you? So if you're a religious person, or a spiritual but not religious person, or if you're a seeker, or a doubter, or an agnostic, or an atheist, here is some free commencement advice from a fellow graduate. Don't take yourself so damn seriously. Laugh at yourself. Use some humor to speak truth to power, especially on behalf of the poor. See what happens when you incorporate joy into your spiritual life and try to locate God's delight for you. Overall, be joyful, cultivate a sense of humor, and laugh for God's sake. Most of all, congratulations and go St. Peter's.